Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and welcome to episode 167 of the Conscious Resistance Live, brought to you by Civil.com. All right, guys, we got a full show tonight. We're going to be talking about the National Guard's reaction force. There's been some recent announcement about that and what that means for potential civil unrest or preparation for civil unrest in the United States. We're also going to be talking about how ICE is starting to scan the faces of Americans in the middle of the streets, just walking around in public. Surprise, surprise. Who could have imagined that? We're also going to be talking about a recent study related to the COVID-19 injections. It's about a month old, but I really haven't seen anybody else talk about this. And one of my listeners sent it to me. So thank you, whoever you are. I can't recall, but thank you. And then we're going to have another health story related to the search for what is causing autism and forever chemicals, and how despite what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Trump and MAHA movement have, talked about trying to get to the bottom of that, there's actually steps that Trump is taking which are completely detrimental to the truth and the search for what's causing autism. So we'll get into that. And then our final story of the night is going to be a bit of local news for me, where I'm living here in Morelia, Mexico. As you can tell, I'm back in my desk, back in Mexico. And this weekend, during the Day of the Dead celebrations, there was an assassination of a local mayor, not in the city I live in, but nearby. And that caused some response, some protest, and some storming of the governor's palace here in Morelia. So we're going to talk about that and how that relates to the U.S. foreign policy talk about this narco-terrorism and how the propaganda about the war on terror has really shifted towards propaganda about the war on narco terror and what that means for U.S. foreign policy. So all that and much more tonight here on theconsciousresistance.com. Guys, I want to remind you, my website is theconsciousresistance.com. This is where I've been broadcasting all of my content for over a decade now, 12 years. The Conscious Resistance has been around this website. And if you want to keep up with everything I do, guys, documentaries, podcasts, interviews, articles, and clips from this show. Every week we release the podcast. So like you see here, the Conscious Resistance Live 166. And throughout the week, we release clips from that show. You can find those clips if you want the shorter versions on our website. You can also find new articles like this one from Don Villa Jr., from Iraq to Venezuela, different invasions using the same playbook. Neil Rademacher has also written some recent articles about what's going on in California. So lots of good stuff. Please do bookmark that and check us out once a week. And as I mentioned, this whole show is brought to you by Civil. And Civil is a podcasting network and streaming platform that I've been working with. You guys have heard me talking about this for the last couple months here. Go to civl.com/TCR. That's TCR for the Conscious Resistance, civl.com. And get signed up, guys. I highly encourage you to sign up over there. $5 a month, $50 a year. You can access so much content. I'll tell you more about it throughout the show. But I want to first tell you that we've been doing this 10-week opt-out challenge that we started October 15th. We've had a couple weeks now. I did the introductory episode. John Bush followed it up talking about financial sovereignty. And last week, I did a deep dive on how to unbank yourself. And I think, honestly, this is the most extensive work I've ever done on that particular topic. It is largely coming from my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. So if you haven't picked up a copy of the book, which you can see on my shelf behind me, I encourage you to go to theconsciousresistance.com/how-to, theconsciousresistance.com/how-to, and you can learn more about that. But if you want to actually hear me break it down myself, because I go much deeper in this challenge over on Civil than I do even in my own book, then you're going to want to sign up here. And in coming this week, John Bush is going to be talking about anti-fragile resolve. Next week, I'll be talking about how to exit from big tech, and so on and so on. This is going to take us all the way to the end of December. So highly encourage you to check this out. Get signed up over at Civil. Of course, I will put this link in the show notes directly to the opt-out challenge if you want to get plugged in there. Let's not waste any time. Let's go ahead and jump right in to the stories for today. So there's a couple of articles I have here. One is from The Guardian. One is from the Wall Street Journal. One is from military.com, which is, as you can imagine, just keeps up with the military news. And let's start with The Guardian. They all are sort of pointing at the same thing, but I believe it was The Guardian that first reported it. Revealed, Pentagon orders states' National Guards to form quick reaction forces for crowd control. A Pentagon memo details plans to train over 20,000 National Guard members across the U.S. to carry out Trump's order on subduing civil unrest. A top U.S. military official has ordered the National Guards of all 50 U.S. states, the District of Columbia, and U.S. territories to form quick reaction forces trained in, quote, riot control, including the use of batons, body shields, tasers, and pepper sprays. And this is according to an internal Pentagon directive, which was reviewed by the Guardian. This memo, which was signed on October 8th, so just 30 days ago, by Major General Ronald Burkett, the director of the operations for the Pentagon's National Guard Bureau, set thresholds for the size of the quick reaction forces to be trained in each state. So basically saying that most states are going to be required to train at least 500 National Guard members for a total of 23,500 troops nationwide. So they're saying we need at least 500 troops from each of your states to be ready on a moment's notice for these so-called quick reaction forces, and they need to be trained specifically in riot control. And let me go ahead and open up this link here because they do actually have an image of this memo, which is always great when we can see the sources. So I'm showing it for those who are watching on the screen. National Guard Bureau. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit. Memorandum for all states. Yeah, it looks about that's zoomed in as we're going to get. Memorandum for all states, subject National Guard quick reaction forces. And so it goes on. And so this is a real thing. There's the proof right there that this is a real memo. The U.S. government is not denying it. They haven't necessarily, celebrated it, that people know about it, but this is an order going on. And of course, where do they get this authority from? If you actually look into the memo that's listed here, they're referencing White House Executive Order 14339, which is called Additional Measures to Address the Crime Emergency in the District of Columbia. This is a memo, an executive order, that Trump issued on August 25th, 2025, when he was first deploying National Guard over to D.C. So that same order required the Secretary of Defense to create a, quote, standing National Guard quick reaction force available for rapid nationwide deployment and quelling civil disturbances. And honestly, I think I covered this if we go back to August in my show when this was first happening in DC, because I remember reading that there was this just a couple of references to quick reaction force. And I think maybe the Associated Press reported on it, but it didn't seem like it caught too many people's attention. Well, now that we're a couple of months after that order, the head of the National Guard, what is his position? The Major General Ronald Burkett, Director of Operations for the National Guard Bureau, he's now drawing up a memo and ordering all the 50 states and U.S. territories to get their National Guard troops to be ready to go. So this order, as I said, is focused on how to mobilize National Guard in the event of civil unrest and to quell riots. Janessa Goldbeck, a former U.S. Marine Corps captain, told The Guardian that the order represented a, quote, attempt by the president to normalize a national militarized police force. And this is something that I've warned about was coming for years, and other people have as well. But I think that it's really becoming clear under Donald Trump that you essentially take the National Guard, which is supposed to be beholden really to the states, not to the feds. But there are scenarios, as Trump is exploiting here, where the feds can sort of federalize the National Guard troops and use them if they, under their own discretion. And that's what's happening in places like Portland, Chicago. Those cases are still being discussed in the courts, but Trump is trying to take National Guard troops from Texas, and the Republican governor, Greg Abbott in Texas, he's happy to send them, but he's also trying to take troops from the state of Oregon and send them into Portland. And so there are certain states that are resisting this, but this is clearly, in my mind, an effort to move towards a federal police force that could be beholden to the president, not just Donald Trump, but to any future president that will do what the president wants when they want it. And it's coming from this memo that I just outlined here. So a couple other quotes here, and we'll move on to the next one. In a worst case scenario, this Janessa Goldbeck, former U.S. Marine Corps captain, she said, in the worst case scenario, the president could declare a state of emergency and say that elections are rigged and use allegations of voter fraud to seize the ballots of secure voting centers. Now, will that happen in the future? It could potentially happen. Donald Trump keeps playing with this idea of running in 2028. And even if he didn't, he might say, hey, you know what? If the Democrats win in 2028, the presidential race, he might say, no, there was all kinds of tomfoolery going around. So we're going to declare that this is an unfit election. We're going to use the National Guard to quell civil unrest and people who are resisting and to stay in power. The Pentagon did not respond to repeated requests for comments. Spokesperson for the National Guard Bureau declined to comment on the concerns that Trump is seeking to normalize a nationalized military police force. A White House spokesperson said the president has lawfully deployed the National Guard to several cities, either in response to violent riots that local leaders have refused to quell or by invitation to assist local law enforcement as appropriate. The president and the entire administration is working to make America safe again, of course. And they even add here, the tremendous results from cities like Memphis and D.C. debunk all of the fear-mongering and lies from The Guardian. The October 8th memo says that the Pentagon will deploy military trainers to every state and U.S. territories as far as Guam, with the goal of making the quick reaction forces operational by January 1st, 2026. So this is not some far-off thing they're putting together. They're trying to get this quick reaction force to be ready to go by the new year. Each state will also provide 100 sets of crowd control equipment to be used to support this requirement. The troops are to be trained to form squad-sized riot control formation, how to employ a riot baton as a member of a riot control formation, how to supervise a riot crowd control operation. National Guard members are also to be trained in de-escalation of force techniques. Well, at least they threw that in there. And each state is supposed to report monthly on its progress. Another Pentagon memo, which was seen by The Guardian, dated September 24th, mandates the creation of a, quote, specialized military police battalion within D.C. National Guard that is dedicated to ensuring safety and public order. This order requires that a 50-person full-time element of this unit be trained and ready for utilization within 90 days and reach full strength by 2027. So it goes on from there. Like I said, this is first reported on The Guardian, and then we got the Wall Street Journal. The Pentagon orders National Guard to establish quick reaction forces for civil unrest and riots, and they're seeing the same things. They're looking at the memos, this internal Defense Department memos, and it's I don't know, guys. This doesn't seem like a good move towards, for me. Like, what are they preparing for? Is it just because they know that the public is increasingly unhappy with what's happening with ICE and that they're starting to resist and push back? Or are they preparing for something else? Are they preparing for Trump to become more aggressive and they need to have riot police under the National Guard ready to go? Now, the Wall Street Journal also reported on another element here. It says, according to Pete Hegseth in a September 24th memo, which ordered the creation of a National Guard response force, said the Department of War will be prepared to immediately provide support to federal, state, and local law enforcement to address threats of civil disturbance and for rapid mobilization as the circumstances require. So, I don't know. This isn't looking good to me. The Wall Street Journal interviewed retired Army Major General Randy Manner, a former senior Guard commander, who said that the creation of dedicated units for crowd control diverts the Guard from its primary mission to prepare for overseas combat and risks blurring the military's traditional separation from domestic politics. That's called posse comitatus, that the military, including the National Guard, is not supposed to be policing local cities. They're not supposed to be involved in local law enforcement. In fact, the crazy thing about this is that while Trump is trying to hype this up as the cities have been in mass, they're war zones, civil unrest everywhere. You see pictures and videos in DC, especially and elsewhere, of the National Guard picking up trash and like cleaning up some of the federal areas, the federal monuments and stuff like that. Clearly, they don't have much else to do. But when they are being actively used, there's typically conflict between the protesters or the local residents and the National Guard, because when you send in a militarized force, it's only going to have the reaction and the sort of action of causing people to say, "Whoa, this isn't good." And so, what are they going to do? They're going to go protest. And so, there was for sure in some cities protests and even things you might call riots in certain places, but not the entire city. I've talked about this before. The idea that Portland or Chicago or DC or Memphis are complete war zones in every aspect of the city, every inch of the city is just this chaos and bloodshed everywhere, is just complete garbage. But that's the message they want to send. So then it justifies, or at least the American people don't make a peep when they send in the military, the National Guard. But then that actually causes a reaction in the people. So I would say that the military and Donald Trump are the instigators here. The White House, of course, does not respond to a comment. The Major General Randy Manner, the retired Army Major General, said that, quote, "There is no need for this. No mission requires this. Every American, I don't care what state you're from, should understand this isn't what we signed up for." So, yeah, it's it's growing. And then we have military.com reporting National Guard in each state is ordered to create quick reaction forces. They're just kind of repeating what I've already said here. But the news is getting out. And they also note that here's memos reviewed by the Associated Press give various numbers for each state's forces, often 500 each, totally more than 23,000. So that's what I'm saying. They're preparing for a 23,000 strong National Guard force across the country to be ready for quick reaction forces to be deployed at a moment's notice if the government, if Donald Trump, if they claim that we're facing civil unrest, they will be very quickly deployed. So I don't know, guys. I'm not here to fearmonger and say that there's about to be martial law today, tomorrow, or even January 1st, 2026, when they're saying this thing should be fully implemented. But I am here to say that we're moving in that direction. I definitely think that this is where things are headed. And whether it happens under Donald Trump, because no, you don't have to be obsessed and sort of see Trump as this singular bad, evil figure. He's not a good guy, and he's working with the New World Order, so to speak. But what's more important, as I've tried to really emphasize in the recent weeks and months, is that the baton of tyranny gets passed from one person, from one party to the next. So even if Donald Trump is not the one to implement this, he is helping put these things in place. And then some new some new president could come in, whether Democrat or Republican, or even a third party if that somehow happened, and they could be the ones to use this. And I talked about this recently. I was actually on Kim Iverson's show a couple of last week, and talking about that, how both parties are passing the baton of tyranny back and forth. And Kim she sort of theorized that maybe AOC is going to be the next presidential candidate, or Gavin Newsom for the Democrats. And so that they might be the tyrant that comes in and does it. And then, of course, people will just blame it on the Democrats instead of seeing how Trump is the one who laid the foundation for this. And this is how it happens back and forth. The same way that Trump is bombing random boats in the Caribbean and claiming it's drug cartels. Well, he picked up that same alleged authority from a Democrat, Barack Obama, who was using that to drone bomb people in the Middle East because he said they were terrorists. And so he established that precedent, and now Trump is using it to go after so-called narco-terrorists without providing proof. That's just one example of how the baton of tyranny is passed back and forth between these parties. And I think more and more people need to recognize this, because it's not just that the Democrats are the problem or the Republicans are the problem. It is that both parties are working together to establish this, this tyranny that we know is coming and is really kind of staring us in the face at this point. So I don't know why people have such a hard time seeing what's happening, but let's go ahead and continue, because this is just one part of the story, the quick reaction forces. But what's happening? Because as I mentioned, Trump has already called for deployment in Chicago and Portland. That's already happening. But the Chicago situation has been put on hold for the moment. This is just last week, so there might be some updates. I don't think there has been, but this is an ongoing developing situation. Supreme Court questions National Guard deployment in Chicago. The justices probed Trump's authority to send National Guard troops to Illinois after a law professor submitted a friend of the court brief casting doubt on the government's arguments. The Supreme Court on last Wednesday asked Donald Trump to answer questions about whether the federal government met the requirements necessary to deploy the National Guard to Chicago. According to the White House, the National Guard troops need to be deployed because federal officials have been unable to execute immigration law with, quote, regular forces, invoking a rarely used statute known as Title 10. And the Supreme Court justices want to know whether regular forces refers to the U.S. military, not federal officials, as Trump suggests. So this gets a little bit in the weeds, but basically Trump and his DOJ is trying to argue that they're not able to actually do what they need to do because they're not getting support from the local government and the local police, and because people are protesting. And Chicago is definitely one of the places where people seem to be most organized and pushing back and trying to block ICE, or at least make the public aware and shout at them and just make it clear they're not welcome. And again, you don't have to like that as a conservative, as a Republican, or somebody who supports immigration policy. But the fact is, a lot of people don't like it. Last week, Martin Letterman, a law professor at Georgetown University, suggested that Trump hadn't met Title X's qualifications. Letterman said that the government clearly defined regular forces, and that's the key term, regular forces. What does that mean? Within Trump's emergency application as civilian federal law enforcement agencies like ICE and the Federal Protection Service. So this lawyer, Letterman, says it is highly uncommon, however, to refer to such civilian officials and employees as any kinds of forces at all, they are certainly not regular forces to which Title 10 refers. The regular forces to which the statute refers are instead the standing military forces of the armed services within the DoD. Now, so he's basically saying the regular forces that Title 10 refers to is the military. Now, I don't know if that kind of seems like a slippery slope and a potentially dangerous argument. Don't give the Trump administration any ideas in saying, hey, you guys are using this wrong. Regular forces doesn't refer to ICE, it refers to the military. Letterman explains that, though, he says that he's not suggesting that Trump can deploy the military to execute federal laws in Illinois. He's just saying that they're not, meeting the qualifications of Title 10. In September, the Department of Homeland Security announced Operation Midway Blitz, which is an effort to ramp up immigration arrests in and around Chicago. And as I've said, the immigration facility in Broadview, which is a suburb outside of Chicago, is basically the focus of the protest, just like there's an ICE center in Portland that is the focus of the protest. This is why I'm saying when they say it's a war zone and that there's protests everywhere, there's violence everywhere, it's just garbage. There's only isolated areas where people are protesting the facilities and their actions. Viral videos have shown officers pointing guns at protesters and deploying smoke grenades and tear gas. One video last month captured an officer throwing a Democratic congressional candidate to the ground. So this is ongoing right now. The governor of Illinois is trying to stop this. This is J.B. Pritzker, and Pritzker is not a good guy. I've written about him in relation to his family, the Pritzker family, very wealthy, very connected, and I think it's his sister who is trans or his brother who is trans, and they are definitely involved in funding a lot of the gender identity propaganda that I've covered in my other many documentaries and reports. So there's some battles going on there, but at the moment, the Supreme Court is trying to decide whether or not what Trump is doing is even legal. What is at stake here is whether or not what Trump is calling an act of rebellion is actually an act of rebellion. So here we go. It says, the White House continues to insist that National Guard troops are necessary to quell protests because the administration says it amounts to a, quote, rebellion. And Trump said that he wouldn't turn a blind eye to lawlessness. The facts haven't changed, however. One of the White House spokesman said, amidst ongoing violent riots and lawlessness, local leaders like Pritzker, who's the governor of Illinois, have refused to step in and to quell. President Trump has exercised his lawful authority. So it goes on from there. The federal government in Illinois must submit a response to the justices by November 10th. So this is actively being discussed right now as I'm reporting this. And already 2 lower courts have just said that there is no act of rebellion in Chicago, and an appeals court declaring that political opposition is not rebellion. A 7th Circuit panel also unanimously rejected claims that protest activity in Illinois hampered federal officers from executing immigration laws. So that's still ongoing, as I said, and at crux, this is just kind of a little bit of an update, as like they're debating this in the Supreme Court now. Is what's happening in Chicago an act of rebellion? I don't think any of us would really look at what's going on there and say it is. But this is kind of par for the course for Trump. He likes to use this big language. Like he's saying, we have an invasion of gang members from Venezuela. We have an invasion of cartel members and gang members from other places coming into the U.S. So that means we need to declare these gangs as transnational terrorist organizations. And in this case, he's saying Antifa and people who are anti-fascist or resisting ICE, that they represent an active rebellion. And I don't think, again, that anybody with their head on straight would say what we're seeing. Sure, is there protest happening? Absolutely, 100%. It is happening, but that doesn't mean that they're an active rebellion. I think that's the big thing, is like Trump likes to take this whole idea of people resisting his administration and his policies and make it seem like we're about to be in civil war. And then unfortunately, Conservative Inc., the mainstream alternative media on the right, loves to play it up because they get clicks and views out there to tell scared conservatives that Antifa is about to riot in the streets. And I mean, how many times have they, let me just digress and go on a little rant for a minute here. How many times have you heard in the last couple months, whether it was the 2 No Kings protests in June and here in October, that this weekend there's going to be riots everywhere? There's going to be civil unrest. There's just so much garbage being promoted, not just by the right, the left as well. But right now, since Trump's in power, Conservative Inc., the mainstream alternative media on the right, is working extra hard to blow smoke up people's ass and tell them that Trump is the greatest thing ever, and also to spread propaganda about the resistance to Trump's agenda. It's only old white people. It's only radical Antifa terrorists. It's only, paid Soros protesters. It's a civil war. It's a war zone. It's an active rebellion. All this language is dangerous. They're domestic terrorists. They're domestic extremists. And I will again invite all of you in my audience who I think are a little bit more enlightened than maybe some of the crowd out there. Maybe that's just my own bias here. But I think you guys have a bit more nuance and understand these situations. That don't fall into that. Don't listen to the Benny Johnsons of the world and these other garbage propagandists and start playing into that same idea that what we're witnessing is a rebellion, is a civil war. That they don't start using the language of these people and saying they're domestic extremists, they're domestic terrorists, because you're only playing into their agenda. And I promise you, my friends, it's not going to be good for liberty in the long term. All right, so one last one on this story right here. Let's talk about this just as a little addendum here. I found this one reported by CBS News a few weeks ago. Actually just last week, October 28th. 2 Illinois National Guard members say they won't obey Trump's orders to deploy in Chicago. So we're starting to see a little bit of resistance here to Trump's agenda. And I think it's a good thing. I know some people will say that you signed up to obey the commands of the commander in chief. So if you don't do it, then there's something wrong with you. You're the problem, etc. But I think this is good. Not only these people may face retaliation for speaking out. You have 2 Illinois National Guard members told CBS News they will refuse to obey federal orders to deploy in Chicago, a rare act of open defiance from within the military's ranks. Staff Sergeant Demi Palisek, a Latina guardswoman and state legislative candidate from Illinois, says, quote, "It's disheartening to be forced to go against your community members and your neighbors. It's not what I signed up to do. It feels illegal," is her statements here. So let me zoom in a little bit. Then we got another one, Captain Dylan Blaha, who is also running for Congress. Now, I do think that's interesting. They're both National Guard members who are also running for office. So this could just be a political stunt for them to try to build up their accolades and their credentials with the left wing and say, look, see, we stood up to Trump. We are openly saying we're not going to deploy. Now elect us to office. So you could be cynical about it, but at the very least, it's a good sign if you're starting to see National Guard members and hopefully in the future military members saying, we're not going to deploy, we're not going to turn against Americans. And so Dylan Blaha, who again is running for Congress, he said, "I signed up to defend the American people and to protect the Constitution. When we have somebody in power who's actively dismantling our rights, free speech, due process, freedom of the press, it's really hard to be a soldier right now. Refusing a lawful federal order to while serving in the National Guard can sometimes result in a court-martial, imprisonment, or a felony-level discharge, depending on who issued the order, whether the soldier is under state or federal control, and the nature of the disobedience." When contacted by CBS News, the Defense Department declined to comment. So they asked the lady, Miss Palachuk, if she would refuse a direct order to deploy to Chicago. She didn't hesitate. "Absolutely, I would definitely say no. I'm not going to go against my community members, my family, and my culture. I believe this is the time to be on the right side of history." And then the gentleman said, look at the 1930s, 1940s Germany. There's a point where if you didn't stand up to the Gestapo, are you just actively one of them now? And so that just kind of gives a little bit more of context. While the courts are fighting this, there's at least 2 National Guard members speaking up. The woman, Palachuk, says they're definitely being used as pawns, talking about other National Guard members. And the other gentleman, he agreed. He says, "Most Guard units are, quote, trained to fight and win our nation's wars. We're not trained to assist ICE and help them just be violent in our communities." He called it shameful. So, yeah, there's at least a couple of National Guard members out there who are saying, I'm not going to deploy on my own people. I'm not going to deploy on Americans. I'm not going to go to American cities and police them. And I think we need to encourage that. I really hope they don't face a court-martial. They don't face felony charges. Would I be surprised? Absolutely not. I would almost expect it, but I really hope they don't. I think that we need to support people like this who are willing to speak up, because guys, if we don't support them, well, then it's not very likely that there will be others to speak up after them. Let me tell you now more about Civil, guys. As I mentioned, Civil is the one who's bringing this podcast to you. They're supporting me financially, emotionally, morally. They're behind me, guys. They're backing me. And if you want to support my work, the Conscious Resistance, one of the many ways to do it is to go to civil.com/TCR. It'll take you to this page you're seeing on the website right on the screen right now. And you get access to the 10-week opt-out challenge that I was sharing with you guys earlier. You get access to my new documentary film, Liberation 2030, which we're going to play a short clip of in just a few minutes. You get access to so many different kinds of content that I'm doing here. And I think that this is really just a great platform, a great company to support. They've got all kinds of great documentaries. They've got podcasts. They've got event feeds from other events they've gone to, Freedom Fest, from the voluntarist conference that I was in Sedona last year. So much great content. Really, really encourage you guys to do that. I'll just say it again. You get access to Liberation 2030 before anybody else. You get access to the 10-week challenge. Later this month, it is coming, the conclusion to my documentary series, The Pyramid of Power, after 5 years, and members of Civil are going to be the first to see it before it goes live in December for the public. So if you want to see the conclusion and see what my final thoughts are on who I think is running the world or attempting to run the world, then you're going to want to go to civil.com/TCR and sign up there. Remember, you can sign up for just $5 a month. You can also do the $50 a year annual subscription, which is what I encourage you guys to do. And you can use the code TCR20 to get a 20% discount off the annual subscription, and you get access to everything that I'm doing. We're not just doing this 10-week challenge and the release of Liberation 2030 and the release of the Pyramid of Power. Going into 2026, we're already talking about creating new documentaries together, and those will be exclusively on Civil. So if you sign up now, you're going to get a lot of new content from me in the coming months. I encourage you guys to do that. One more time, civil.com/TCR. All right, let's continue our conversation about ICE. Just a couple of stories here that I think are important. These are both coming from 404 Media. And I want to encourage you guys to follow 404 Media. They tend to have, I would say, more of a left-leaning, potentially progressive bias slightly, but they do great reporting when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to really calling out Trump's agenda, and not just Trump's agenda, but a lot of important topics. I would say 404 Media, as well as Drop Site News, along with the Gray Zone, are all three good sources for information that, again, if you can go into it understanding they might have a slight left-leaning bias, you can find lots of good content there. And hopefully you're capable of reading things, even if people have a different view, and just getting the good information out of it. This one is called ICE and Border Patrol Agents Are Scanning People's Faces on the Street to Verify Citizenship. Videos on social media show officers from ICE and Border Patrol using facial recognition on people in the field. One expert described the practice as pure dystopian creep. And so if you're watching on screen, let me zoom out a little bit. These are some highlight videos of ICE agents. You see them just literally going up to people, taking a picture of their face, or using a little device to scan their face and then try to confirm their citizenship. Now, some of you might say, this is great. They're using technological tools to, make their job easier and to confirm people's identities. And that's a good thing. Don't we want more efficiency in government? I don't want more efficiency if it means more tyranny. And you have a Fourth Amendment as an American citizen, or even as a undocumented person in the U.S. A lot of people have trouble with this, but yes, due process does apply to foreigners, and civil rights and human rights do apply to foreigners. Constitutional rights do apply. So if you're a green card holder, you're a resident, you're an American citizen, or you're even undocumented, so-called illegal, you still have rights. But it's very difficult to argue and defend your rights when the rest of the country is basically saying you don't have any. So let's just read a little bit of this. You don't got no ID? A Border Patrol agent in baseball cap, sunglasses, and a net gaiter asks a kid on a bike. The officer and 3 others had just stopped the 2 young men on their bikes during the day, and what a video documenting the incident says is Chicago. One of the boys is filming the encounter on the phone. He says in the video he was born here, meaning he would be an American citizen. When the boys say he doesn't have an ID on him, which, by the way, is your right to not carry an ID, the Border Patrol officer has an alternative. He calls over to one of the other officers who says, "Can you do facial?" The second officer then approaches the boy, gets him to turn around to face the sun, points his own camera directly at him, hovering it over the boy's face for a couple seconds. The officer then looks at his phone screen and asks for the boy to verify his name. The video stops. And another video of a different incident, this time filmed from the perspective of a driver that authorities have also apparently stopped in Chicago. A group of ICE officers surround the driver's side window. One of the officers wearing a vest from ICE and Enforcement and Removal Operations, ERO, tells one of the coworkers the driver is refusing to be ID'd. The second ICE official then points his own phone camera at the driver. I'm an American citizen, so leave me alone, the driver says. All right, we just got to verify that, says one of the ICE officers, with some of the group peering at the phone. The officer with the phone points the camera at the driver again, asks him to remove his hat. If you could just take your hat off, it'll be a lot quicker. I'm going to run your information. These videos and others, which have been reviewed by 404 Media, show that ICE and Border Patrol are actively using smartphone facial recognition technology in the field, including in stops that seem to have little justification beyond the color of someone else's skin. Then looking up their information on the phone, including the person's identity and potentially their immigration status. It's not clear which apps the officers are using. 404 Media previously revealed that ICE has a new app called Mobile Fortify, which scans someone's faces and is built on a database of 200 million images. And I encourage you guys to look more into that. I will be doing an investigation soon on Mobile Fortify, who's making it, what's behind it, and where is that database coming from. The app queries an unprecedented number of government databases, so there you go, government databases, to return the subject's name, date of birth, alien number, and whether they've been given an order of deportation. These videos are evidence that the more high-tech ambitions of the Trump administration mass deportation campaign are now a reality. And I just want to point out about this that I kind of called this here. In fact, let me go ahead and pull up my article real quick just so I can show you guys that I was warning you. So I have it pulled up here, just a couple of articles I wrote, both at the beginning of Trump's administration. This one's recent. Big tech and AI firms are winning under Trump's second administration. That's continuing. Meet the spyware companies preparing to unleash their tech during Trump's second term. I wrote this right after the election, and just showing you, because of the calls for immigration enforcement, big tech companies are winning. NSO Group, among others, and as well as the private prison industry, they're winning big under Trump because of the enforcement of the immigration laws in this militaristic way. And then just another one, a little reminder, I wrote this back in December last year. Federal government watchdog warns the DHS surveys Americans without a warrant using more than 20 technologies. So they have all the tools they want to scan you and to monitor you. Now they're using facial recognition apps, just walking on the streets and just scanning the faces of regular people who they suspect might be illegals. And of course, they're using profiling based on person's skin. So there are videos showing that Trump's using these things. ICE is using these at Home Depot. Of course, Home Depot's been a big site of conflict over the last year. Allison McDonald, an assistant professor of computing and data science at Boston University, says, quote, "From these videos, it seems like ICE has started using live facial recognition in the field." She previously worked at Georgetown Law University, which has reported on the rise of facial recognition. I've reported on their reports and how these are posing a danger for American citizens. So here you can see is a screenshot of one of the videos. In fact, it appears that it's an X video. So let's go ahead and see if we can just open that up real quick. Matthew Griglia, a senior policy analyst at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, says, quote, "The growing use of facial recognition by ICE shows us two things: that we should have banned government use of facial recognition when we had the chance, because it is dangerous, invasive, and an inherent threat to civil liberties, and any remaining pretense that ICE is harassing and surveilling people in any kind of precise way should be left in the dust." Because there's no precise aspect of this. They're literally just going up to people and saying, "Can I do a facial? Can I scan your face?" And it's increasing, guys. So that's one thing. And here, let me just go ahead and show this. This is a video from Twitter. DHS investigate a potential illegal alien in West Chicago. Loudmouth Lupe Esquire from my previous video can be seen in the background with the orange hoodie. DHS agents were incredibly patient and respectful during this investigation. So this person's obviously favorable to ICE and what they're doing here. But the point is that this video shows the use of this face scanning in the field, and why people don't see that as a problem is beyond me. Here's one more from 404 Media, also related to facial recognition. This was just reported on Halloween, so just 4 days ago. You can't refuse to be scanned by ICE's facial recognition app, according to a DHS document. Immigration enforcement does not let people decline to be scanned by its new facial recognition app, which the agency uses to verify a person's identity and their immigration status, according to an internal DHS document which is obtained by 404 Media. This document also says any face photos taken by the app, called Mobile Fortify, will be stored for 15 years, including those of U.S. citizens. So they're going to have your stuff till 2040. Think about that. The document provides new details about the technology behind Mobile Fortify, how the data it collects is processed and stored, and the DHS's rationale. As I pointed out a moment ago, they are now scanning the faces of people in the open streets. And now this document is saying you can't even say no to it, which I'm not surprised. But again, this is a complete violation of the Fourth Amendment. The document called the Privacy Threshold Analysis, a PTA, says ICE does not provide the opportunity for individuals to decline or consent to the collection and use of biometric data photograph collection. A PTA is a document that DHS creates in the process of deploying new technology. It is supposed to be used by DHS's internal privacy offices to determine and describe the privacy risks of a certain piece of technology. So according to the document, which was dated in February, Border Patrol and ICE are jointly submitting this new mobile app PTA for the ICE Mobile Fortify mobile app, a mobile application developed by Border Patrol and made accessible to ICE agents and officers operating in the field. So the document says Border Patrol is supporting ICE as a technical service provider to carry out requirements of Trump's executive order protecting the American people against an invasion. After an ICE agent takes a photo of the subject using their work-issued Android or iPhone, the tool then queries a wide range of Border Patrol and other databases, including Border Patrol's travel verification service. For that system, Border Patrol takes photos of people's faces when they enter the U.S. So this is why they want to scan everybody's faces as they enter the U.S. And as I reported last week, the biometric entry-exit system is rolling out in the U.S. They're now requiring foreigners to have their faces scanned. Yes, I know some of you will say that's been happening for years, but you might not have known it, but it was optional. It is no longer becoming optional. And as of December 26, 2025, they're saying it will be mandatory all across the United States by air, by land, and by sea. That was Trump's plan. And they're starting with foreigners right now. But anybody who thinks this isn't going to be expanded to Americans, you haven't been paying attention at all. And just another little bit of a development here, guys. So ICE is walking around scanning the faces of people in the streets. And according to their documentation, you don't have the right to say no to it. You will be scanned whether you like it or not. That's just how things are going to be here. And the United States of tyranny. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what else to say, guys, other than just emphasizing what I keep emphasizing, that those who are blindly supporting Trump's agenda, this immigration agenda, are really welcoming in the police state. And the police state can roll in any number of ways. This is important for people to understand. The police state can roll in under the guise of fighting a pandemic, like we saw during COVID 1984. The police state can roll in under the guise of the war on terror, as we saw post 9/11. And now we're seeing the police state roll out under the guise of fighting illegal immigration, fighting against drug cartels, fighting narco-terrorism. They're still accelerating the same agendas that so many of you were resisting and fighting when it was happening under COVID tyranny, or fighting and resisting when it was happening after 9/11. But now the agenda and the reason for doing this has changed. But the agenda is still the same. Now it's just about immigration and it's about narco-terrorists and stuff like that. But the same agenda is rolling out. Tyranny, surveillance, loss of privacy, loss of liberty, technocracy, and eventually digital IDs. Right now it's face scanning, biometrics. It's going to lead to digital IDs. I guarantee you they will say that digital IDs are necessary to fortify the elections, or digital IDs are necessary to make sure that no illegals are entering the country. And if you're just blindly supporting this, my friends, sorry to say it, but you are supporting your own enslavement. You might not see it right this moment, but that's where it's headed, my friends. There's no way around it. So please, please, please keep questioning this immigration agenda that Trump is pushing forward, especially if you are somebody who thinks that immigration is a problem and that we should do something about it. Okay, you can be for immigration enforcement, and you can also say, but I don't support these tactics. I don't support masked men going in, rounding up people and tear gassing and flashbanging people in their homes. I don't support violations of the Fourth Amendment. I don't support violations of posse comitatus or due process. You can hold both thoughts in your mind. I know that's hard for some people, but you can. For me, personally, I'm against all of it. I know where this is headed, and I really, really hope people wake up to this ASAP. Guys, I want to remind you that the best place to support the conscious resistance, besides signing up over at Civil, is going to be going to our website and buying some of our shirts. We have all sorts of awesome shirt designs. I'm currently wearing the You Are a Creator shirt right here. We got the brand new Liberate All Life. We got Revolution Without Healing is a Recipe for Disaster. That's a quote from my first book. You are a creator. We got the exit and build shirt. We don't want voting. We don't want violence. We don't want apathy. We're going to exit and build the new paradigm. Holistic anarchism, which is something I've written about in my books and talked about over the years. No masters, no slaves. We took that Illuminati all-seeing eye pyramid and inverted it. And a lot of people don't notice on the back behind the pyramid, there's the equal sign because there's no masters, no slaves. We're all equal. So we take their symbols and we invert them. We turn them upside down. The conscious resistance with just our logo, and probably our most popular one, you are powerful, you are beautiful, you are powerful, and you are free. And each of these shirts you can buy, most of them, maybe I think 1 or 2 designs are only available in black, but for the most part, you can mix and match colors and designs. We do have some of them available in female cut tanks. Most of them are just unisex t-shirts. And if you want to go there, buy a shirt, buy a book from me, from our website directly. That's the best place to support our team, support what I do here. If you buy a shirt, the funds go directly to me and my team so we can support each other and keep doing this important work. So thank you guys so much if you go ahead and get a shirt. And also, you know what? If you have bought a shirt from the Conscious Resistance, or if you're going to buy a shirt, send me a picture of you wearing it. I would love to share on my social media feed all the great people who are buying these messages and spreading them throughout the world, because I hear from so many people, these shirts are a great conversation starter. They wear them to yoga. They wear them to the local community meetup. They wear them around and people ask, that's awesome. Where did you get that from? Or it starts up a conversation. And before you know it, you got new friends who are paying attention to the world. So check that out over at theconsciousresistance.com. Now, these next 2 stories are going to be focused on health. I talk about health topics here and there over the years, and this one is really important. I don't have a whole lot to say other than just trying to bring it to your attention. This is a study which was published in, it's called Biomarker Research, Biomed Central. This link will be in the show notes, of course. And I believe it is an open access journal, which means in the eyes of some people, there's less peer reviewing in the process. Not to say that the peer review process is perfect anyways. We all know that the peer reviewed process is very flawed. There's a lot of studies that get published, even in quote unquote peer reviewed journals, which are not very sound and, could have corporate influence. Nevertheless, I think this one deserves your time and attention. It's called 1 Year Risk of Cancers Associated with COVID-19 Vaccination, a large population-based cohort study in South Korea. The oncogenic, excuse me if I'm pronouncing that wrong, oncogenic potential of SARS-CoV-2 has been hypothetically proposed, but real-world data on COVID-19 infection and vaccination are insufficient. Therefore, this large-scale population-based retrospective study in Seoul, South Korea, aimed to estimate the cumulative incidences and subsequent risk of overall cancers 1 year after COVID vaccination. Data from 8.4 million people, so this is quite a database here, between 2021 and 2023 were obtained from the Korean National Health Insurance Database. Participants were categorized into 2 groups based on their COVID-19 vaccine status. The risks for overall cancer were assessed using multivariable Cox proportional hazard models, and data were expressed as hazard ratios and 95% confidence intervals. The hazard ratios of thyroid, gastric, colorectal, lung, breast, and prostate cancers significantly increased at 1 year post-vaccination. In terms of vaccine type, cDNA vaccines were associated with the increased risks of thyroid, gastric, colorectal, lung, and prostate cancers. mRNA vaccines were linked to the increased risk of thyroid, colorectal, lung, and breast cancers, and heterologous vaccination was related to the increased risk of thyroid and breast cancers. Given the observed associations between the COVID-19 vaccination and cancer incidence by age, sex, and vaccine type, further research is needed to determine whether specific vaccination strategies may be optimal for populations in need of a COVID vaccination. So this isn't like the researchers are trying to say COVID vaccines are giving everybody cancer. They're a bit more conservative and measured in their analysis, as scientists tend to be. But they're definitely saying that there is an increased risk of all these types of cancers with every type of COVID vaccine that they studied. So this is what they wrote here to the editor. Since the COVID-19 outbreak in December 2019, it has become a global concern because of the lack of preventive and treatment options. It is caused by severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, which, that's a whole other debate, which is linked to high morbidity and mortality among the elderly. With the rapid development of COVID-19 vaccines, the fatal complications caused by COVID-19 have been alleviated. I don't think that's true. However, several other issues, including adverse events related to vaccines, have emerged. So they're still taking kind of a mainstream viewpoint, saying the COVID vaccine stopped the alleged pandemic, but they're still acknowledging that there have been an increase of cancers and problems. So here's one little point I'll highlight. Our data showed associations between COVID-19 vaccination and an increased risk of 6 gastric, colorectal, lung, breast, and prostate. In terms of vaccine type, they're just kind of repeating what they said a moment ago. The cDNA vaccines were associated with increased risks of thyroid, gastric, colorectal, lung, and prostate. mRNA were linked to the increase of thyroid, colorectal, lung, and breast cancer, and so on. Meanwhile, vaccinated males were more vulnerable to gastric and lung cancers, whereas vaccinated females were more susceptible to thyroid and colorectal cancers. In terms of age stratification, the relatively younger population, under 65, was more vulnerable to thyroid and breast cancer. By comparison, the older population, 75 and older, were more susceptible to prostate cancer. Booster doses substantially affected the risk of 3 cancer types in the vaccinated population: gastric and pancreatic cancers. Our findings highlighted various cancer risks associated with different COVID-19 vaccine types. Now, I know for many of my audience, you guys are like, dude, we already know this. We've been talking about this for a while. Other researchers have pointed this out. I get that, and I'm with you on that. I also think every bit of evidence we get to point in this direction, we need to highlight and we need to promote. And you need to share this study with your friends and family members who still think we're crazy for asking questions about the COVID shots and the dangers posed by them. In fact, this live stream is on YouTube, right? And it's going to be airing on YouTube. And it's potential that I might get deleted off YouTube again, or that this video will get taken down, or I'll get a strike on my channel, which is kind of crazy because it's a study. YouTube censors AI. I'm reading a study. This is not me making things up. And it's also, we're several years after the fact. And by this point, even the most resistant mainstream, proponent of the COVID vaccines, except for maybe Dr. Peter Hotez, is willing to admit that there have been adverse reactions. Now, they might downplay it and say, okay, well, that's in 1% of the population. That's this and that, whatever. But I don't think anybody at this point can really deny that the COVID shots have caused adverse reactions. And this study from, what was it, like several million people in Korea, in South Korea. Let me go ahead and make sure I don't get misquoted and get taken down. 8.4 million individuals between 2021 and 2023 from their national health database. And they're showing significant increases in all types of cancers based on all the different vaccine types. But again, they're saying further studies are warranted to elucidate potential causal relationships, including the underlying molecular mechanisms related to COVID-19 vaccine-induced hyperinflammation. And the concept of a booster dose involves re-exposure to the immunizing antigen to enhance immunity. The protective effect of the COVID-19 vaccination diminishes over time. As such, further boosters are needed to restore immunity. Given the decreasing severity of COVID, current concerns regarding the COVID vaccine primarily revolve around adverse events with the booster shots. Considering that significantly higher risk of gastric cancer in vaccinated individuals than in unvaccinated individuals, clinicians should prioritize monitoring the risk of gastric cancer in relation to COVID-19 booster doses. In conclusion, COVID-19 vaccination should be associated with an increased risk of 6 specific cancer types. Again, they repeat the cancer types. Notably, this COVID-19 vaccination cancer risk was likely more elevated among the 65 years and up individuals, except in individuals with prostate cancer. Given the observed associations between the COVID shots and cancer incidence by age, sex, and vaccine type, further research is needed to determine what the heck to do about this. Well, I think it's clear. Stop recommending the COVID shots to people. Stop giving it to people. And in fact, maybe tell people that these cancer risks are so high and so prevalent in the population, because the vast majority of people are still being told by the CDC, even under Donald Trump. I mean, Trump had his health checkup like a month ago, and they said he's, fit as a mule. He's the healthiest 80-year-old ever to live, etc. Oh, by the way, he got his flu and COVID shot at the same time. So, if that's true, and it's not just Trump shilling for the shots because he can't let it go, then Trump could be at risk of cancer. I know Biden got cancer, right? That's what we were told late in his administration. Was it from the COVID shots? I also know For example, the mayor of Houston that I ran against and confronted several times, he died of cancer. This guy was out there promoting the COVID shots. I have friends, close friends, and others who got the shots, and at least one of them I know did die of cancer in the last year, and now they leave behind a family. So this is very real, my friends. Please do share this study. You will find it in the show notes at theconsciousresistance.com. All right, now we're going to move on to another health story. This one is important because I've been saving this one for a while and waiting for the right time, and I think it's time to talk about it. So under Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., we've seen the promotion and the growth of this Make America Healthy movement. And it's all about trying to remove toxins from our foods, get people exercising, all kinds of things that I think everybody listening to this would support and be grateful, if they were actually happening. Unfortunately, when you get down to really looking at what Trump is doing and what RFK is doing, for every positive they may be doing, there's lots of negative happening. So, for example, in the last month or two, Americans have been told it's not the vaccines that have anything to do with autism, it's Tylenol. Now, Tylenol, acetaminophen, the ingredient that's the active ingredient in Tylenol, it can cause harm to your liver. If you take high doses, I say this is somebody who tried to overdose using Tylenol 20-something years ago, and it can do a lot of damage to your liver. It can become fatal. But they're claiming it's related to autism. Okay, I'm not going to speak to that specifically. I haven't looked into their references. I know they did reference one or two studies. Most of the mainstream just kind of laughed and said, aha, Trump and RFK are pointing at Tylenol. What a bunch of idiots. And then it seems like some of the health freedom movement was like, oh my God, okay, why are they not talking about vaccines? This seems like a cop-out. Well, here's another reason we should be concerned about this. If RFK is genuinely trying to find the causes of autism, I've got a bunch of links here showing that what Trump is actually doing and what RFK is doing is not helping. Because if it's not just the vaccines, and let's say it's Tylenol, I think it's more than likely the rise of autism is related to a number of environmental factors, which could include things like vaccines and autism and Tylenol, but it probably could include the things that are being sprayed in the sky above us and getting into the soil. It could include pesticides, and it also could include forever chemicals. And so this is from ProPublica from back in August. RFK Jr. vowed to find the environmental causes of autism. Then he shut down research trying to do just that. And so here's just the highlights. Again, all these links I'm about to go over will be in the show notes at theconsciousresistance.com. Slashed autism funding. RFK Jr. promised to identify the causes of autism, but has eliminated parts of his agency actively investigating them and has cut millions in funding for autism research. Silent on rollbacks. Once an ardent environmentalist who took on big polluters, RFK has been silent on Trump's dismantling of efforts to combat climate change and pollution. Again, I'm not a big, proponent of this climate change theory stuff, but it's absolutely true that Trump and some of the funding that he's getting rid of was focused on fighting pollution and trying to find solutions to that. Now, personally, I'm not a big, believer that government should be taking taxpayer dollars and using it for all kinds of projects. But nevertheless, they are taking money from projects that are specifically focused on pollution, which has been linked to autism. Conflicting priorities. RFK Jr. helps lead an administration that is reversing regulations on pollution and chemicals, including some linked to autism. That's the big thing here, is that the steps that Trump is taking and that RFK is sort of by his relationship supporting and condoning are going directly against their efforts to find out where autism is coming from. Erin McCanley's was listening to the radio one morning in April when she heard RFK promising to find the cause of autism by September. The Secretary of Health and Human Services said he believed an environmental toxin was responsible for the dramatic increase in the condition and vowed to gather the most credible scientists from all over the world to solve the mystery. Nothing like that has ever been done before, he told in an interview. McCanley's was stunned. This is a researcher. Again, she's a researcher with the government. She said, the work has been done. That's exactly what I've been doing, she said to her husband, Fred. She's an epidemiologist, or she was, at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, which Kennedy oversees. And she said she has spent much of the past 2 decades studying how parents' exposure to workplace chemicals affects the chance that their child will have autism. Just 3 weeks earlier, she had been finalizing her 4th major paper on the topic when RFK eliminated her entire division. Kennedy also has overseen tens of millions of dollars in cuts to federal funding for research on autism. So, I mean, right there is like you've got a woman within the government, National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, who is an epidemiologist who says she's written several papers showing that there's workplace chemicals that parents are exposed to that are linked to autism and may be causing the rise in autism. And instead of promoting that, working with that, they decided to get rid of that. And now they go on here and talk about how, he's an anti-vaxxer. So we'll skip past that. Again, it's important to be able to use discernment and nuance. You can read an article like this and you can skip past the garbage that when they're like, oh, these are just a bunch of crazy anti-vaxxers. As Kennedy promotes his new initiative, ProPublica has found that he has also taken aim at the traditional scientific approach to autism, shutting down McCanley's lab and stripping funding from more than 50 autism-related studies. Meanwhile, he has stood by as the Trump administration encourages the departure of hundreds of federal employees with experience studying the harm caused by environmental threats and rolling back protections from pollution and chemicals, including some linked to autism. Kennedy and the HHS did not respond to questions for this article. Genetic factors account for a significant portion of autism cases, according to this researcher, and research like hers and other government-funded scientists have conducted over the past 2 decades has established that environmental factors have a role too and can combine with genetics. And if you understand epigenetics, that your DNA and your genetics can change. They're not static based on your emotional state, trauma, as well as environmental factors. So it can be a combination of things. It can be genetic, which is the sort of nature argument, versus environmental factors, but maybe the two can combine together and that your genes and your DNA can change and maybe make your children more predisposed to things like autism because of things you've been exposed to in the environment. Multiple factors can even converge within the same individual. Some of those environmental risks could be reduced by the very measures that the Trump administration is rolling back. Kennedy would have been well positioned to advocate for researchers looking into environmental causes of autism while he's on Trump's cabinet. Unfortunately, that's not what he's doing. So this is a pretty long article. We're just going to read a little bit more here. And this epidemiologist that they're interviewing, she says, I don't think he's aware of my work or most of the literature that's been published on what the causes of autism are. She says that she's been studying how a toxic chemical called beryllium causes chronic lung inflammation in workers when she began to seriously think about autism. This was in 2005. She starts researching, getting into autism. And then she starts working with other researchers. They start comparing data sets, information that they gathered from 2 large group of parents, those who had children with autism and those whose kids developed neurotypically, which means they didn't have autism. Comparing the group's chemical exposures before their children were born could help illuminate the causes of the condition. Another epidemiologist at the University of California, Davies, says that they were a pioneer searching for the causes of autism. And in that 2009, she published a much cited paper highlighting a 7-fold increase in diagnosis in California. So what could that be? Well, it could be related to these chemicals that people are being exposed to at work. And it says these researchers found that the autism risk is increased. It has to do with parental age at the time of birth, a mother's fever during pregnancy, and more traditional environmental considerations such as chemical exposures. So this just goes into the story of this researcher and how the 2 researchers started partnering together. They published a study in 2012 using the data to see if parents of children with autism were more likely to have been exposed to chemicals already thought to be affecting the developing brain. The work was technical and time-consuming, but the analysis showed a clear relationship. Mothers and fathers of children with autism were more likely than parents of unaffected children to have been exposed to solvents such as lacquer, varnish, and xylene on the job. These solvents evaporate quickly and can be easily inhaled or absorbed through the skin. Chemical plant workers, painters, electricians, plumbers, construction workers, cleaners, and medical personnel are among those who may be exposed to these solvents. Now, they had a small sample size, just 174 families, but the results found that there were possible links between autism and exposure to metals and certain solvents during early childhood and pregnancy, including one solvent called methylene chloride. They also tracked with studies linking chemicals to miscarriage, reproductive problems, birth defects, and other developmental problems besides autism. So the point in this article is that they've done a study in 2019. They did another study in 2012, then 2019 with more than 950 families. That 2019 study showed that women exposed to solvents during pregnancy and the 3 months leading up to it were 1.5 times more likely to have a child with autism than women who were not exposed to it. Then they published another study in 2023, which took the link between solvent exposure and autism as a starting point. They looked at blood samples to check out the genetic makeup of the parents of the children with autism. And they found that when they were exposed to solvents on the job, people with specific variants of 31 genes had an especially elevated risk of having a child with autism. Their genetic makeup appeared to increase the risk solvents by themselves posed. Some of those 31 genes help cells connect with another. Others play a role in helping cells migrate to different areas so they can grow into the various parts of the brain. So the point is that these researchers are saying like, hey, RFK, we've already done a lot of this homework. We've already shown how these different forever chemicals, including BPA, air pollution, pesticides, diesel exhaust, etc., and in those solvents that they just mentioned, can lead to autism and other defects. But the Trump administration is either not paying attention to these studies, or they're firing the people who are doing the studies, like this woman here. Here's another one. Trump 1.0 funded her PFAS study. Trump 2.0 revoked it, and PFAS is the forever chemicals. A research project on forever chemicals was abruptly canceled by the EPA in April. The agency still wanted the report, though. When EPA awarded researchers $1.6 million grant in 2020 to study forever chemicals in rural communities, the agency described the work as a top priority. But 3 months ago, the research team was abruptly ordered to stop their project. In contrast to the EPA's support during Trump's first administration, the current administration defunded the research because it no longer, quote, advanced program goals or agency priorities. And so this just goes into another story of how people, who are researching forever chemicals and how that could be connected to autism and just forever chemicals in general are being defunded under Trump's second administration. Here's another one. This is the big announcement. This is where Trump decides to reverse a rule by Biden. This is one of the good things that Biden did, or whoever was, was the puppet master of Biden that they did. EPA announces it will keep maximum contaminant levels for PFOA and PFOS. These are forever chemicals. EPA intends to provide regulatory flexibility and holistically address these contaminants in drinking water. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin said he will keep the current national drinking water regulations for perfluor. So I can't even pronounce it. We'll just call it PFOA and PFOS, which set nationwide limits for these forever chemicals in drinking water. The agency is committed to addressing PFAS in drinking water while following the law and ensuring that regulatory compliance is achievable for drinking water systems. So what this doesn't say, because this is the official EPA announcement, is that the Biden administration had set new limits for this forever chemicals, and then the Trump administration said, no, never mind, we're not going to do that. We're going to keep the same, we're going to keep the maximum contaminant levels, where the Biden administration was trying to lower the allowable amounts in the water. Here's another one from ProPublica. Trump's first EPA promised to crack down on forever chemicals. His second EPA is pulling it back. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin claims to prioritize combating long-lasting chemicals called PFAS. Despite this, the agency has delayed enforcement of standards and terminated over $15 million in funding for forever chemicals. This is back in July. I will include this in the show notes as well, because these are just more examples how they're cutting research into forever chemicals. They are limiting efforts to regulate or ban those forever chemicals. They're limiting research that's actually looking at the causes of autism, all the while pointing the finger at freaking Tylenol. Now, here's just to kind of give a little bit of the various opinions out there. According to a January 2023 study finds little evidence of link between autistic traits and forever environmental chemicals. Kaiser Permanente analysis of the ECHO program data is the largest study to date on autistic traits in children and forever chemicals. It says that they found suggestive evidence of an association with autism-related traits in children for just 1 of 8 forever chemicals studied. This was published in the journal Epidemiology, found a modest increase in autism-related traits in children exposed to PFNA, but no association with the others. So this study is basically saying, like, no, forever chemicals are all good. I haven't looked into this. There could be some industry funding behind it, or it could be what it says, and there's just other variables here. But let's look at some other reports. Researchers find forever chemicals impact the developing male brain. This is more recent, July 2025, University of Rochester Medical Center. Forever chemicals have been widely used in consumer and industrial products for the better part of a century, but do not break down in the natural environment. New research from the Del Monte Institute for Neuroscience at the University of Rochester suggests that they are not safe, finding that early life exposure to PFHXA may increase anxiety-related behaviors and memory deficits in male mice. Although these effects were mild, finding behavioral effects only in males was reminiscent of the many neurodevelopmental disorders that are male-biased, said Anya Majewska, professor of neuroscience and senior author of the study, which is published in the European Journal of Neuroscience. Research has shown that males are often diagnosed with neurodevelopmental disorders such as autism and ADHD at a higher rate than females. The researcher says, quote, this finding suggests that the male brain might be more vulnerable to environmental insults during neurodevelopment. So that will give you that link and you guys can check it out. And here's another one. This says prenatal exposure to forever chemicals linked to autistic traits in children, study finds. This is July 2025. This is coming from scipost.org, which is a psychology website. So remember, I showed you that other one a couple seconds ago that said in 2023, they only found one association with one forever chemical. But here we are 2 years later, and this study is saying prenatal exposure to forever chemicals can lead to autistic traits. New research suggests that exposure to certain synthetic chemicals during early pregnancy may be linked to a higher likelihood of autistic traits in children. The study found children whose mothers had a higher levels of exposure to a chemical called perfluorooctanoic acid, PFOA, in their blood during early pregnancy were more likely to show signs of social and communication difficulties by age 4. Now, let me just go back real quick because I think that is the same chemical here. Let's check this one out. So this one said study finds little evidence between autistic traits and forever chemicals. And I think it was the same one. Yeah, no, this one was a different one. PFNA. So they said that was the only one that they found, that was the 2023 Kaiser Permanente study, but we go to this one in 2025 and they're pointing at another one, PFOA. So it's slightly different. Then they're also pointing to another forever chemical called PFHXS, which was more strongly associated with autistic traits in children who had a higher inherited risk of autism. So these studies are coming out, guys. The data is out there. I'm going to give you a couple more here. This is from December 2024, the Journal of Hazardous Materials, prenatal exposure to forever chemicals, genetic factors, and autistic traits, evidence from a Shanghai birth cohort. Prenatal PFOA exposure was associated with an increased risk of autistic traits in children at the age of 4. Increased risk was mitigated by self-reported pre-pregnancy folic acid supplementation. Prenatal exposure to PFHXS exposure and genetic predisposition may collaboratively contribute to an elevated susceptibility to autistic traits in children. That will be in the show notes as well. And one more here. This is, what's the study called? Go up to the top. Excuse me, where is it at? Okay. The effects of parental occupational exposures on autism spectrum disorder, severity, and skills in cognitive and adaptive domains in children with autism spectrum disorder. This is from July 2025. And let's just go ahead and look at what it says here. It's talking about autism. Let's go to the conclusion. Let's just click this. The statistical analysis showed that ASD severity was most consistently associated with increasing estimates of exposure during the index period, 3 months prior to pregnancy until the birth of the child, to phenols, ethylene oxide, and pharmaceuticals. These findings suggest that each of these types of occupational exposures may play a role in severe ASD phenotypes. That's autism. Furthermore, occupational exposures to plastics, polymers were consistently and significantly associated with poorer cognitive skills, deficits in adaptive skills, lower composite measures of both cognitive and adaptive functioning, and increases in several aberrant behaviors. With such robust findings, the evidence presented here indicates broad neurodevelopmental impact from workplace plastics polymers. So again, this is just more and more evidence showing the concerns and how these various chemicals can be associated with autism. So all of these links will be in the show notes for you guys to peruse and take a look at. I just want to kind of, go back to my original point here, which is that if RFK is claiming he is focused on getting to the root cause of autism, and they're telling people that it's Tylenol, but meanwhile, they are ending studies that were ongoing. They're firing people who were already studying the impacts of polymers and solvents and forever chemicals. And we have numerous studies over the years building up showing that forever chemicals are linked to autistic traits and various neurodevelopmental disorders. But those are the same types of regulations that Trump is rolling back. So they're rolling back regulations. They are ending funding and getting rid of people who are doing studies in this area. And instead, they're telling you to point the finger at Tylenol. They're not even talking about vaccines. They're saying it's Tylenol. They're not talking about forever chemicals. Yes, I know there have been times where RFK has talked about environmental exposures. That's great. Talk is nice, but you got to look at the action. And the Trump administration, with RFK's help, is actually working against what they claim they're fighting for. So how is that MAHA? How is that Make America Great Again? I mean, I don't think it is. I don't think it is. I think it is more bullshit designed to get you to support politicians and people who don't have your best interest at heart. And I would love to hear all of you in the comments who were supporters of MAHA or who voted for Donald Trump specifically because of this MAHA movement. What do you think about this? Have you been fooled? Am I missing something here? Is this irrelevant? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. All right, before we get to our last story about this situation in Mexico, I want to tell you more about my documentary, Liberation 2030. And in fact, instead of me telling you about it, why don't I just show you the quick trailer real quick? And then if you are excited, you're interested, you can go to civil.com/TCR and you can sign up and watch this before anybody else. Check it out real quick.
In 2016, the World Economic Forum and Forbes magazine published a short essay titled, "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better." Written by Ida Auken, Denmark's former Minister for the Environment, the essay imagines what life might be like in 2030. The year 2030 was chosen because of its importance to the achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2030. The SDGs are a collection of 17 interlinked objectives adopted by the UN in 2015 with the ostensible goal of ending poverty, protecting the planet, and spreading peace and prosperity to all people by 2030.
Now is a historical moment, a time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system.
And while millions of people have woken up to this agenda, the vast majority are still spending their time being reactive and allowing these technocrats to manipulate their emotions and actions, and thus their lives. What if, instead of exclusively being reactionary, we put all of our energy into creating our own visions for 2030? If we know we reject the technocratic Great Reset and Agenda 2030, then we must spend time getting to know exactly what we are seeking to create. Instead of, you will own nothing and be happy in 2030, perhaps we can make it, you will be thriving and you will be fulfilled in 2030. The answer completely depends on every single one of us. The future generations are depending on us to build an alternative to the technocratic vision.
All right, I hope that got you guys excited because I'm excited to share this with everybody. I've been getting great reviews from everybody who's watched it over at Civil. Thank you guys for signing up. Thank you for watching it, for the kind comments. Like I said there, I mean, this is my vision of trying to create an alternative to Agenda 2030. People are so reactive, so focused on they, them, those, and they spend very little time focused on what you can do. It's 2025, guys. We're a couple of months away from 2026. You got 2026, 27, 28, 29. 4 years until we get to 2030. And I think more of us need to start thinking about what we're going to do for our lives and our family instead of focused on they and them, because otherwise there's just going to be nothing to do but accept the digital IDs, biometrics, facial recognition. But if you work day and night to get to the point where you are taking care of your family and you're the one in charge of your life, then maybe you'll get to Liberation 2030. Maybe you'll have a different life after all. All right, let's get to our final story of the night. This is a bit, as I said, of local news, what's been happening here in Mexico. I've been trying to share more and more of what's going on where I live, and I'm going to continue to do that. So this weekend, Day of the Dead, Saturday, there was a killing of a local mayor here in Michoacan. He was a mayor of a city called Urapan. And I'm going to show you this. This was a video. I actually watched this a couple weeks ago, coincidentally. This was released over the summer. About the fight against the cartel in Urapan, Michoacan. And the mayor His name was Carlos Manzo. He was elected in the elections last year specifically for his efforts to fight and combat the cartel, because the Mexican people, despite what a lot of people out there think that, Mexicans just accept the cartel and are okay with it. No, there was a lot of people, a lot of Mexicans who are sick of it and who want somebody to come in and do something about it. And they don't get a lot of help from the federal government, of course, because there is definitely, as I'm going to show you guys in a few minutes, some interactions and some connections between the feds in Mexico and the feds in the U.S. and the cartels. There's some interesting connections there. So people are sick of this. And this guy ran on a campaign of he's going to actually do something about it. And I will include the link to this mini documentary in the show notes, because it's really interesting to watch, especially now that he's been killed, because you can see in the comments, if you want to translate to Spanish or translate to English or just read the comments in Spanish, people are like, wow, this video is even more meaningful now that he's dead. This guy had big balls and he stood up. Well, unfortunately, he was murdered this weekend by cartel members. But, we're not 100% certain who it was, but it's obvious that it was related to his fight against the cartel. So here's a few headlines I'll show you. Mayor's murder. Well, let me get to the first story. Michoacan, riots grow in Morelia after the death of Carlos Manzo. So this was interesting. First, this is the initial thing. First, he's murdered on Saturday. And then on Sunday, there were protests in Morelia because Morelia, which is where I live, is the capital of Michoacan. So they're a couple hours away in Uruapan. He's murdered. There's a big protest movement that takes place, and most of it was peaceful. It was just people protesting the streets, frustrated, especially because there is a large belief that the governor of Michoacan, the state we live in, is very connected to the cartels. And so you can see here, for those watching, here's the public funeral, people carrying his caskets through the streets. After the assassination, his full name was Carlos Alberto Manzo Rodriguez. He won won the mayorship of Uruapan as an independent candidate. That's another thing, is he was an independent candidate, not with any of the parties. And he'd been calling out President Claudia Sheinbaum to fight against the organized crime. And I know there's a lot of people who have conspiracies about Claudia Sheinbaum, especially because she is of Jewish ancestry in a vast majority Catholic country, and there is a small population of very wealthy Jews in Mexico City. She is sort of part of that community, but she doesn't seem to be an outspoken Zionist, at least. But there is definitely suspicion that her and her party, the Morena party, are connected deeply to the cartels. So this guy, Carlos Manzo, is fighting the cartels in his town. He's speaking out against the president of the country, and then he gets killed. And he is killed on Saturday in the main square of town and in Uruapan. And Uruapan has about 350,000 people there. He died from his wounds at the local hospital. So people were obviously pissed off. And on Sunday, a large group of protesters marched through the historic capital. And again, this is literally... Pause that real quick. So here in the city where I live, on Sunday in Morelia, a large group of protesters gathered in the centro, and they were protesting. They were upset. They were frustrated. Like I said, they were calling out the alleged connections between the cartel and the governor of the state. And outside of the government palace, it's actually the palace of the governor, protesters shouted slogans such as "Justice for Manzo," "Enough with all this crime." And a small group of protesters, which are sometimes described as encapuchados, people in hoods, or infiltrators. This is like what you would say in the U.S., Black Bloc, Antifa. They started basically breaking into the palace. They carried out vandalism. They were breaking windows, destroying furniture. There's videos of some people throwing Molotov cocktails. And, people were cheering this. People were definitely, I think, supportive in some ways. Ultimately, the police came. They used tear gas. They used rubber bullets to disperse the protesters. The Michoacan Attorney General's office said that 8 people, both men and women, were arrested in connection with the damage of the buildings. Here you can see some of it. And here you go. I mean, who are these people? Who are they paid by? Could they be infiltrators? Could they just be angry young people, which Mexico is full of course, who are just pissed off? And so they just come in and throw things down and cause chaos. Protesters accused the state government of killing Manzo and called for Ramirez Bedoya, who is the governor, and the Morena party to get out of the office. So, people are frustrated. They say they killed the best mayor of the the state. And here's a little bit of clip from Twitter. Let me go ahead and show this on screen. This is people marching through the streets during his funeral. This guy had a lot of support, man. He was actually somebody willing to take on the cartels. And so this is a sad day for justice in Michoacan and in Mexico. I'll show you a couple other views here. Protesters storm government building in Mexico after killing of local mayor. You can see some pictures there. I think we got a video. Let me go ahead and show you this video. Again, you see masked men. They're not all masked. Some of them just look like young people who are angry. And unfortunately, like I said, that's common in Mexico as well as the U.S. and many parts of the world. You know, I tend to think things like this are sort of like a release valve. There's a guy throwing a Molotov cocktail into the government building. Another guy comes up in a moment, and you can see there's gasoline all over everything. So this guy throws the Molotov in there, and then he lights the fuel on the ground so that it'll spread like crazy. And he's careful not to light himself on fire. Like I said, in some ways, I think this is a release valve where people are just angry and they need to express themselves. So they come in and they cause destruction. And then other times I do wonder if these are truly infiltrators, provocateurs that are just going to justify more government violence and more policing. It's not completely uncommon in Mexico. For better or worse, people like to fight the cops in the street. Sometimes cops get attacked. They get Molotov cocktails thrown on them. Michoacan, riots grow in Morelia after the death of Carlos Manzo. Here's some more photos of people grabbing the fences and stuff like that. I will include all these in the show notes. And here's just another report we'll go ahead and play. This is more video of people inside the governor's palace. And this is in the Centro. I bike by this. I go by this place all the time. And people always spray paint and tag the building. So again, it's not uncommon. But this is following the death of this mayor who was extremely popular, and people are now pissed at the governor. He tried to come to the, I think the memorial or even the funeral, and people were yelling at him, telling him to get out. Like, you're the cause of this. You're responsible for this. We're just going to skim through some of this. This is a 20-minute video, but you can see protesters who are screaming and yelling, and people are upset. People are upset because this mayor who stood for something was assassinated on Day of the Dead, and I'm sure that is intended to send a message. Now, this gets me to the larger point. Where is this headed? In my view, this could be about trying to get U.S. support to come into Mexico. We've already seen talks of that, as I've been covering in recent weeks, how they're talking about Venezuela, and they're talking about, you know, sending U.S. forces and U.S. troops over there into Venezuela. But it does seem like there's definitely an effort to do the same thing in Mexico. And it really, honestly, I'm like, nah, that would never happen in Mexico. But why should I be surprised based on everything we know about the U.S. government and the way they're working? Look at this, just literally days after, within days and hours of this assassination, Trump administration is planning new mission in Mexico against cartels, current and former U.S. officials say. This was just reported yesterday. New operation would include U.S. troops on the ground in Mexico, striking drug labs and cartel leaders, according to current and former U.S. officials. Now, this is a complicated thing because, like I said, many Mexicans, they support Carlos Manzo and his effort to try to get rid of the cartels. Mexicans don't want the cartels here. They don't want them affecting their lives. Mexicans would love some peace and some normalcy. And at the same time, Mexicans, like I think most people around the world, are very weary of the idea of the U.S. government coming into their country and, you know, bringing in soldiers and troops or bringing, you know, drones. There's already surveillance drones in the U.S., but now they're talking about bombing Mexican cartels. And of course, inevitably, that would probably lead to civilian deaths. I don't know, guys. There's conspiracy theories online that Carlos Manzo's assassination, not only is it intended to send a message to anybody who would stand up against the cartel, but there's conspiracy theories that Claudia Sheinbaum had something to do with it. I don't know that there's evidence for that. There's also conspiracy theories that the assassination was allowed to happen in order for the U.S. to say, look, see, stuff is happening over in Mexico. Assassinations are taking place. We need to go in there. This is the justification that we've been looking for. And unfortunately, the reality is that assassinations are somewhat common in Mexico and have been for decades. There's lots of propaganda online. I'm sure there's somebody right now getting ready to type in the comments, oh, during the presidential race, Derrick, there was a 30 different assassinations of presidential candidates. Claudia Sheinbaum was clearly trying to get rid of the competition. I've seen that promoted on my own channels and pages. That's not true, guys. The assassinations that took place during the Mexican elections last year were in the mayoral races, much like this guy, Carlos Manzo. There were candidates who were speaking against cartels, or at least saying that they would do something about the cartels, and they were assassinated. There's no evidence that has anything to do with Claudia Sheinbaum, and that wasn't in the presidential race. I just get so sick of bad information out there in general, but especially about Mexico, because people just repeat garbage that they hear online. But the point is there an effort for the U.S. intelligence, U.S. military to try to come into Mexico and to use some of these incidents as justification for getting here? The other big question is the CIA involved in funding the cartels? I'm going to put 2 links in the show notes. This is from Cynthia Chung from 2024, the CIA's complicity and the Mexican drug cartels, including military training at Fort Bragg, and how a Green Beret co-founded a major bank caught in drug money laundering. This is from a book, Operation Gladio, The Unholy Alliance Between the Vatican, the CIA, and Mafia. I encourage you guys to read that. That will be in the show notes. Here's another one from the Gray Zone back in 2021. The U.S. Special Forces trained Mexican drug cartels linked to decapitation, torture, and rape. That's referencing the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, which is a heavily militarized cartel that has been growing in Mexico the last couple of years. And there's definitely some links between there. You can see in some of the images how much like military gear they have. They didn't just get that from nowhere, and they didn't steal it from the Mexican military. Somebody's been training these people. Somebody's been giving them the tools they need to do their job. And it does appear that there is some former U.S. military officials, and I say former in air quotes, who have been offering training, Green Berets, Special Forces, etc. So I believe that, and as many people believe, that the cartels and the threat of cartels is kind of like the fear and the threat of terrorists in the United States. It's another way to keep the population in line. Cartels are going to come get you. We have to pass new laws, like we have to pass biometric laws, and we have to do all this other kind of stuff. We have to increase military power and police spending and power in order to keep you safe from the cartels. That's what I believe that this is mostly about, is that they use the cartels as a way to get the policies and the things that they want passed. That doesn't mean that the cartels aren't real, that cartel violence isn't real. It is real. It does happen. But what people don't understand is that the vast majority of Mexicans live their lives without ever being impacted by it. I live here in Morelia, right where these protests were taking place, and I don't ever see violence in the streets. I don't ever see decapitations. I don't ever see, just criminal activity, other than just the general criminal activity that happens anywhere, like people breaking into a car or stuff like that. So it is not everywhere, but it is real. And I think that is the intelligence agencies and the U.S. military, which allow the cartels to thrive because they benefit from them in some way, and maybe even they want them there. But now it seems under the Trump administration, they're using these justifications to talk about coming into Mexico and finally doing something about those cartels. But nevertheless, as I said, this kind of all kicked off this weekend because there was a assassination of a mayor a couple of hours away from where I live, who was trying to do some good work and was publicly speaking out and chastising and condemning the cartel, and was using his resources in his local city to actually go after criminal activity. And now he's dead. He's been assassinated. So we'll see what happens, but I definitely hope we don't see Americans supporting calls to invade or bomb Mexico, because that is not a step in the right direction, guys. And I hope that you guys will resist it and push back as much as possible. All right, guys, that is it for today. We are going to end the show here. Want to remind you guys, if you want to support my work besides buying t-shirts, you can go to theconsciousresistance.com/invest. Send me some checks, some cash, some love mail, some hate mail to my P.O. box. I checked my P.O. box recently, guys, and there was nothing in it. I was very sad. Go to theconsciousresistance.com/invest to see the address for my P.O. box. You can sign up to support on a monthly basis on Buy Me a Coffee, Substack. You can support via crypto. All those details will be found at theconsciousresistance.com. And of course, you can always go over to civil.com/TCR and support there as well, guys, because we got a lot of good things coming on the Civil platform. Thank you guys for being here today. ICE is expanding. They're getting ready with quick reaction forces, preparing for civil unrest. They're starting to scan people's faces everywhere they go, all under this guise of fighting narco-terrorism and fighting illegal immigration. The MAHA movement seems to be pretty much a failure and another psyop and fake out, because while they claim they're trying to get to the root of the causes of autism, they're actually slashing funding and getting rid of scientists who've been pointing at some of the causes, like forever chemicals and solvents and polymers and some of these other workplace chemicals that people are exposed to, and new studies showing that the COVID shots are leading to cancers. It's tough out there. There's a lot going on, guys. And like I said, here in Mexico where I live, people are trying to find a way to achieve normalcy and get to a place where there's not criminal activity everywhere infecting the government and cartels and mafias and things like that, without giving the U.S. permission to come invade the country and without losing rights. This is the eternal battle between security and freedom. How do we maintain our freedom, our privacy, our liberty without giving up our freedoms in the process? I don't have the perfect answers for the Mexican people or the American people or for people around the world, but I know we need to be discerning. We need to be skeptical. We need to communicate with human respect in the ways that we interact with each other, so we don't fall into this divide and conquer trap, so we can use our critical thinking to find the real solutions. Don't buy into their fear porn. Don't buy into their division porn. Don't buy into the clickbait, the rage bait. Stop listening to the mainstream alternative media that's trying to divide you and turn you against each other. Stop listening to people who just constantly tell you how screwed the world is, because yes, there's a lot of crazy things going on, but we are still the solution. We still have the power and the potential to change the world, my friends. So find the people in your local area. Go to freedomcells.org, find local people, get connected, start building outside of the system, start focusing on your exit and build goals, join civil and start taking our 10-week opt-out challenge. Download my book at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. Solutions are available, my friends. You just got to unplug, stop paying attention to the Great Reset and Agenda 2030, and plug into Liberation 2030 and the People's Reset. And in fact, speaking of the People's Reset, I just want to remind you guys again, this is the event I host every January, and it's coming up January 28th to February 1st. It's going to be a great time. 5 days here in Morelia, Mexico, in the beautiful mountains of this lovely historical city. And come here, get connected with 500 people from more than a dozen countries for 5 days to talk about solutions. Tickets are available right now at thepeoplesreset.org. If you can't come in person, you can watch for free online. Watch the days about mental, physical, spiritual health, permaculture and food independence, building parallel systems, unplugging from big tech, building free and conscious communities. And if you can come in person, you're going to get to meet all these hundreds of other freedom lovers, these solutionaries. You're going to get conscious music. You're going to get ceremonies. You're going to get workshops, 30 plus speakers. It's going to be a great time. Again, the tickets are available at thepeoplesreset.org. And one of the conscious artists that we are featuring is a woman by the name of Nattali Rize, who does great, great work. And Nattali will be performing along with Dub FX, myself, and many of other great conscious performers. So today's show, we're going to end with a song from Nattali Rize. This is called One People. This is a few years old. It's her most popular song by far. And I can't wait to hear it from her in person, because she's going to be doing a really cool unplugged acoustic set for her. So thank you guys for being here with me. Please do share this show. Guys, I'm shadow banned everywhere, in case you haven't noticed. I've been doing this work for almost 16 years now, and I'm shadow banned on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook. I don't have nearly the reach that I should, even with the numbers that they claim I have. I need your help to get past the shadow banners and past the algorithmic cage that I'm in, to reach new people. So please go to theconsciousresistance.com, share the link to this show, share the link to our clips, share my interviews, share my documentaries, and keep spreading the word, guys. Enjoy this song from Nattali Rize. And until next time, my friends, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.
Critic enemy, You create more problems than you got the remedy. You're misleading and deceive my people endlessly. And then you wonder why me never want you next to me. Your civilians are like slaves, like in servitude. And the only way you keep them is to keep them from the truth. While your institutions keep indoctrinate the youth. We hear you speak of hope and change, then you leave no proof, eh? Babylon, you're smart, now this is more than true. But when the people wake on up, they'll come straight after you. There's no escaping from the plans we got set out for you. You see your men, women, and children coming after you, eh? Life with you's illusion, not reality. And for anyone who wants some peace, you name insanity. You subdue my people with stories and fantasies. False governments, false courts, false authorities in this iration. All nations, one people, one destiny, yeah. Iration. All nations, one people, one destiny. Babylon, you are a sickness to society. There is no other that could claim more notoriety. With all your chemical concoctions of variety, what you really seek is for my people to go quietly. But what they're really getting ill from is your mind control. It has diminished our intelligence and numbed our souls. Manipulation of the masses is your only goal. You may have succeeded, but the difference is now we know. So what you gonna do without our energy? Cause now we're using it to make a brand new energy. Yeah, we infuse our meditation, our philosophies, learning to transcend beyond the realms of this reality, yeah. So Babylon, it's over now, it's time you go. When one foundation's a rotten, you can't go no more. So lift your eyes and set your sights upon that door. And get the out of our lives, don't come back no more in this iration. All nations, one people, one destiny, yeah. Iration. All nations, one people, one destiny, yeah. Music's the healer, the healer. She's the healer. Music's the healer, the healer. She's the healer. Oh, the healer. Oh, in this iration, yeah. All nations, one people, one destiny, yeah. Iration. All nations, one people, one destiny, yeah.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.